Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, watching the stars through the main screen when the message arrived, and changed everything for humanity forever. The ship's communication officer turned to him with worry in her eyes, as she spoke quietly about the urgent transmission from the Galactic Council that demanded immediate attention from all human leadership across known space. Morrison read the message 3 times before he could believe what the alien words actually meant for his people and their future in the galaxy. The Council's demand was simple but terrible in its complete scope and devastating implications. Humanity had 1 standard year to destroy every military ship they owned and dismantle all weapons and defense systems they had built to protect their colonies from the dangers of space and hostile forces that might threaten their people. The message explained that this was humanity's path to eternal peace under the protection of the 12 species that controlled this part of the galaxy, through their ancient wisdom and superior technology. Commander Lisa Bennett came to stand beside Morrison as he finished reading and saw the concern growing in his expression. As the full meaning became clear to both of them, Bennett was Morrison's second in command and had served with him for 8 years through 3 different conflicts, where human courage and determination had saved lives and protected innocent people. She looked at the transmission data and noticed that similar messages had been sent to every human world and military installation at exactly the same moment in a coordinated action that showed careful planning. The terms were specific and left no room for interpretation or negotiation about what humanity must surrender. All military vessels, from the smallest patrol craft to the largest battleships, had to be destroyed within view of Council observers who would verify the complete elimination of human military capability. Orbital defense platforms around every human world would be dismantled piece by piece until nothing remained to protect civilian populations from any threat. Most shocking of all was the demand that humanity surrender all weapons technology, including research data and manufacturing capabilities, to ensure they could never again build tools of war. In return, the Council promised that humanity would live in peace as protected members of the galactic community with all their needs provided by their wise alien guardians. Morrison sent an immediate message to Earth, where President Alan Carter was already meeting with his closest advisors to discuss humanity's response to this unprecedented demand. The President had called together General Kate Sullivan, who commanded human military forces, and Ambassador Peter Hayes, who had spent years building relationships with alien species and understanding their complex political systems. General Sullivan argued strongly against accepting any terms that would leave humanity defenseless in a galaxy where threats could emerge from unknown sources. She pointed out that human military strength had earned them respect among alien species and protected their colonies from raiders and hostile forces that preyed on weak civilizations throughout the outer systems. Ambassador Hayes believed that careful negotiation might find a middle path that would satisfy the Council while preserving some defensive capability for humanity. He had studied alien cultures for decades and understood that many species valued peaceful solutions over military confrontation when properly approached with respect and diplomatic skill. The alien representatives arrived at Earth within days of sending their ultimatum and were led by Veltar, who belonged to the Zephyrian species, known for their ethereal beauty and calm demeanor. Veltar spoke in perfect human language as he explained that every successful species in galactic history had followed this same path from military aggression to peaceful cooperation under Council guidance. Dr. Amy Rodriguez spent days reviewing historical records that the Council provided as examples of how other species had benefited from surrendering their weapons and accepting protection. The peaceful Altarians had given up warfare centuries ago and now lived in harmony with nature on beautiful worlds where conflict was unknown and suffering had been eliminated through wise alien management. The proud Centauri had once built mighty fleets that dominated their region of space, but had eventually seen the wisdom of joining the Council and abandoning their aggressive ways. Even the advanced vegan confederacy with their superior technology had chosen to accept Council protection rather than continue their costly military programs that drained resources from peaceful development. Commander Nick Barnes worked in human intelligence services and spent his time carefully studying the data that aliens provided about previous species that had joined the Council. Something about the records troubled him, though he could not identify exactly what seemed wrong about the official histories of how other civilizations had made the transition to peaceful membership in the galactic community. Barnes noticed that the records contained no information about what happened to species that refused the Council's generous offer of protection and peace. When he asked about this during diplomatic meetings, the alien representatives explained that such species had chosen to leave known space rather than accept the benefits of civilization and had disappeared into the unknown regions beyond Council territory. The deadline approached quickly, and humanity faced the most important decision in their history as a spacefaring species. Accept the Council's terms and live in peace, but surrender the ability to protect themselves, or refuse and face the unknown consequences of defying the most powerful alliance in the galaxy. Morrison looked at the stars and wondered what choice his people would make and what it would mean for their future among the alien civilizations that watched and waited for humanity's answer to their ultimatum. 3 months after the Council's ultimatum, humanity began publicly dismantling their military forces while secretly investigating what really happened to species that refused to surrender their weapons and accept alien protection. Dr. Amy Rodriguez led a covert mission to the Kepler 442 system, where records indicated the militant Draconian Empire had once ruled over several star systems with an iron fist before mysteriously disappearing from galactic history. The research ship approached the dead worlds carefully, using stealth technology to avoid detection by any Council monitoring systems that might be watching for unauthorized visitors to forbidden zones. What Rodriguez and her team discovered changed everything they thought they knew about the Council's peaceful intentions and the true fate of species that chose military resistance over diplomatic surrender. The planets showed clear evidence of complete orbital bombardment that had lasted for months until every city was reduced to radioactive ash and every military installation was melted into glass by energy weapons of incredible power. This was not conquest where the victors claimed territory and resources, but total extermination designed to erase every trace of draconian civilization from existence. Deep underground bunkers contained the final transmissions of draconian military commanders as they faced the overwhelming Council fleet that had come to destroy their people for refusing to accept peaceful subjugation. The recordings revealed that the Council had offered the same terms to the Draconians that they now offered humanity, and when refused had returned with a massive armada to eliminate the threat completely. Rodriguez transmitted her findings to Captain Morrison, who was conducting diplomatic missions to Council worlds while secretly gathering intelligence about the true nature of alien civilization. What Morrison discovered during his visits confirmed the worst fears about what acceptance of Council protection actually meant for any species foolish enough to believe their promises of peace and prosperity. The once mighty Centauri who had supposedly chosen to abandon warfare now served as laborers in alien factories and mines with their advanced technology confiscated by Council authorities for the greater good of galactic civilization. The Centauri people Morrison met seemed content with their lives, but showed no spark of the pride and independence that had once made them a formidable military power. Even more disturbing was Morrison's visit to Altarian settlements, where the peaceful species lived in carefully controlled reservations that resembled parks more than cities. The Altarians moved through their daily routines with the calm satisfaction of domestic animals who had forgotten they were once free beings, capable of making their own choices about how to live. Each species that Morrison visited believed they were the Council's most favored children and remained unaware that other conquered peoples existed in similar conditions throughout Council space. The aliens had perfected a system of control that kept subject species isolated from each other and grateful for the protection that had cost them their freedom and dignity. Intelligence Chief Nick Barnes uncovered the systematic approach the Council used to identify and eliminate potential threats to their galactic dominance. They watched for emerging spacefaring civilizations and offered immediate contact and membership in the galactic community as soon as a species developed faster. Then light travel capability. The pattern was always the same across hundreds of years of galactic history. First came peaceful contact and cultural exchange that impressed primitive species with alien technology and wisdom. Then came the offer of protection and membership in the Council, with the simple requirement that the new species abandon their primitive military ways and accept guidance from their enlightened alien friends. Species that accepted found themselves slowly absorbed into the Council system, with their resources harvested and their populations managed like valuable livestock. Those that refused faced the combined military might of 12 species, working together to eliminate any threat to their carefully maintained order and peaceful civilization. President Carter faced growing pressure from the Peace Coalition led by Senator Martha Collins, who argued that humanity's violent nature had caused too much suffering throughout their history. Collins believed that surrendering military power would finally allow humans to evolve beyond their primitive aggressive instincts and join the enlightened galactic community as peaceful contributors to universal harmony. The senator organized massive demonstrations where millions of humans demanded immediate compliance with council terms and an end to the military programs that drained resources from education and social welfare. Collins pointed to the beautiful alien worlds they had been shown, where war was unknown and every citizen lived in comfort under the wise guidance of their council protectors. General Sullivan reviewed the military implications of complete disarmament and concluded that acceptance meant eventual extinction for humanity as a distinct species. The evidence from Rodriguez's investigation proved that the Council eliminated any group that retained the ability to resist their control even decades after initial submission. The general began developing contingency plans for military resistance, while publicly supporting the disarmament process to maintain the deception that humanity was seriously considering acceptance. Sullivan knew that any species capable of destroying the Draconian Empire would have little trouble eliminating human resistance. Unless humanity could find advantages that previous victims had lacked, Morrison continued his diplomatic missions, while his wife Helen worked to establish communication networks that could coordinate resistance activities across human space without alerting Council observers. Their daughter Emma watched her parents work late into the night on projects they could not discuss and sensed that something important was happening that would affect their family's future. The Council representatives expressed satisfaction with humanity's apparent cooperation as military installations were dismantled and weapons were surrendered to alien oversight. Veltar privately reported to his superiors that another warrior species would soon join the ranks of the peaceful, and that the dangerous human expansion into galactic affairs would end before it could threaten Council stability. Barnes discovered that the 12 ruling species of the Council were themselves survivors of an earlier conquest where they had betrayed their own people to earn junior partnership in the alien hierarchy. Each ruling species had once faced the same choice now confronting humanity and had chosen survival through collaboration over extinction through resistance. As the deadline approached, humanity faced the most difficult decision in their history, with full knowledge of what acceptance or refusal would mean for their future. The evidence was clear that compliance would lead to slow absorption and eventual extinction, while resistance would bring immediate war against overwhelming odds. Morrison looked at the alien ships orbiting Earth and wondered if humanity possessed the courage and cunning necessary to survive what was coming next in their relationship with the galactic powers that controlled this region of space. Humanity began the most ambitious deception in their history by publicly continuing the dismantling of military installations while secretly launching Operation Deep Strike to prepare for the war that everyone now knew was inevitable. Admiral Susan Clark coordinated the construction of hidden shipyards in asteroid fields and within the thick atmospheres of gas giants where Council sensors could not detect the massive building program taking place. The plan required absolute secrecy, because a single leak would bring the combined Council fleets to destroy humanity before their preparations were complete. Clark worked with thousands of engineers and workers who believed they were building mining equipment and civilian infrastructure while actually constructing the most advanced military vessels humanity had ever designed. Dr. Carlos Weber led the development of revolutionary stealth technology that would allow human ships to operate undetected in Council space long enough to strike vital targets. Weber's team studied captured alien sensor systems and discovered weaknesses that could be exploited by ships designed specifically to avoid detection rather than survive direct combat. The Shadow Fleet took shape in secret facilities throughout human space, with each vessel built for speed and firepower, rather than durability, since humanity could not match Council numbers or defensive capability. Human ships would need to strike fast and escape before enemy reinforcements could respond to their attacks on supply lines and communication networks. Colonel Paul Turner established special operations teams on Council worlds by infiltrating human diplomatic missions and trade delegations with soldiers trained to blend into alien society. Turner's people learned alien languages and customs, while secretly mapping military installations and identifying strategic targets for coordinated strikes. When the war began, the deception required real sacrifices from people who genuinely believed in the peace process and wanted humanity to accept Council protection. Senator Martha Collins continued organizing demonstrations, demanding immediate compliance with alien terms while having no knowledge that her authentic reactions helped convince Council observers that humanity was seriously considering surrender. Many military personnel never learned about Operation Deep Strike, and their bitter protests at forced retirement added credibility to the illusion that humanity was genuinely dismantling their defenses. These soldiers watched their ships destroyed and their bases abandoned while believing that their leaders had chosen cowardice over resistance to alien demands. Captain Morrison maintained his role as chief diplomatic representative while secretly coordinating intelligence gathering across Council space. Morrison's access to alien facilities and communication systems provided vital information about Council military capabilities and strategic planning that would be essential when hostilities began. Helen Morrison used her position as a civilian contractor to establish the underground network that would coordinate resistance activities when the war started. Helen recruited trusted individuals throughout human space who could maintain communication and supply lines during the coming conflict without alerting Council surveillance systems. The couple's daughter Emma began asking difficult questions about why her father's diplomatic work had become so secretive and dangerous. Morrison struggled to maintain the deception with his own family while knowing that Emma's safety depended on her remaining ignorant of the preparations taking place around her. President Carter faced the enormous challenge of maintaining public support for apparent compliance while secretly preparing for total war against the most powerful alliance in known space. Carter worked with a small group of trusted advisors who coordinated the military buildup while keeping the true scope of preparations hidden from most government officials. The president authorized massive spending on supposedly civilian projects that were actually military facilities disguised as research stations and manufacturing centers. Carter knew that the economic cost was enormous, but also understood that the alternative was the slow extinction of humanity as an independent species. General Sullivan trained human forces for a completely different kind of warfare than they had ever fought before, using tactics based on speed and surprise rather than traditional military doctrine. Sullivan's officers studied the rigid tactical approaches used by Council species and developed counters. Based on flexibility and unpredictable maneuvers, human soldiers learned to fight as small independent units capable of operating behind enemy lines for extended periods without support or resupply from main forces. The training emphasized individual initiative and adaptability, since human forces would need to respond quickly to changing battlefield conditions without waiting for orders from distant commanders. Weber's stealth technology allowed human reconnaissance ships to study Council military bases and fleet movements without detection. The intelligence gathered revealed that alien forces followed predictable patterns that had not changed for centuries and could be exploited by opponents willing to abandon conventional tactics. The most difficult part of the deception was maintaining Normal diplomatic relations with alien representatives who visited human worlds to monitor disarmament progress. Veltar and other Council observers had to be convinced that humanity was genuinely preparing to surrender. While secret construction continued at hidden facilities throughout human space, Turner's infiltration teams reported that Council security was focused on preventing rebellion by subject species rather than detecting preparations by supposedly compliant groups. The aliens had grown complacent after centuries of successful conquests and did not expect humanity to attempt military resistance after appearing to accept their terms. Clark's hidden shipyards produced vessels that incorporated every advantage humanity could develop, including improved weapon systems and defensive capabilities that surpassed anything in the official human fleet. The new ships were designed for the specific mission of striking Council targets and escaping before superior numbers could overwhelm them. The countdown to the deadline created enormous tension throughout human space as people waited to learn whether their leaders would choose surrender or resistance. Most civilians had no knowledge of the secret preparations and genuinely believed they faced a choice between peaceful submission and hopeless war against overwhelming odds. Morrison received intelligence reports indicating that Council fleets were positioning themselves for immediate action if humanity refused their terms. The alien military buildup confirmed that the Council expected possible resistance and was prepared to implement the same solution they had used against the Draconians and other defiant species. As the final weeks approached, the secret preparations reached completion with hidden fleets ready for deployment and infiltration teams positioned on target worlds throughout Council space. Humanity had built the capability to strike the first blow, but everyone understood that the coming war would test their species' determination and ingenuity against an enemy that had never faced serious resistance to their galactic dominance. On the final day of the disarmament deadline, President Carter stood before cameras, broadcasting to every human world, and spoke the words that would change galactic history forever when he declared that humanity rejected Council terms and chose to fight for their freedom. The signal reached Admiral Clark's hidden fleets and Colonel Turner's infiltration teams, simultaneously triggering the most coordinated military strike in human history. Clark's Shadow Fleet emerged from concealment throughout Council space, striking logistics hubs and communication relays with devastating precision, while alien forces struggled to understand what was happening to their supposedly secure territory. The stealth technology that Dr. Weber had developed allowed human ships to appear without warning at targets the Council had never thought to defend. The opening attacks focused on crippling Council coordination rather than engaging their main fleets directly, since humanity could not win through superior numbers or firepower. Human commanders understood that their only advantage lay in speed and surprise against an enemy that had grown complacent after centuries of unchallenged. Turner's special operations teams activated on 12 worlds, simultaneously sabotaging power grids and transportation networks while striking military installations with explosives placed during months of careful preparation. The Zephyrian crystal cities that had impressed human diplomats with their beauty proved surprisingly fragile when shaped charges severed their structural supports. The aquatic hydron defense platforms failed when human divers emerged from concealment in underwater bases to plant charges that shattered the alien installations from within. Turner's people had spent months learning to operate in hostile environments while maintaining the appearance of peaceful research activities. Captain Morrison revealed his true mission aboard the Council's primary command station when he uploaded a virus into their fleet coordination systems that Weber's team had designed specifically to exploit weaknesses in alien computer networks. The virus spread through Council communication systems faster than their technicians could respond. Morrison and his crew fought their way to captured Council shuttles while broadcasting tactical intelligence to human forces throughout the battle zone. The peaceful diplomatic facade disappeared as Morrison's team demonstrated the combat skills they had concealed during months of apparently routine negotiations with alien representatives. The Council's response was massive but predictably slow as their enormous dreadnoughts began moving toward Human space with the deliberate pace of forces that had never faced serious opposition. The alien ships were designed to intimidate rather than fight, since the Council's previous victories had been achieved through overwhelming force rather than tactical skill. Human vessels darted between the lumbering Council fleet's striking supply ships and support vessels while avoiding direct confrontation with the heavily armed capital ships. The hit-and-run tactics frustrated alien commanders who were accustomed to enemies that stood and fought according to conventional military doctrine. The war's first month established the pattern that would define the entire conflict as humanity demonstrated they could not win through direct confrontation but could make Council forces pay dearly for every advance. Each human loss cost the aliens dozens of ships and thousands of troops. As the guerrilla campaign spread throughout Council territory, Admiral Clark coordinated the defense of human space while maintaining offensive operations behind enemy lines. Using supply bases that had been secretly established during the preparation phase, Clark's forces operated with minimal support structure, since traditional logistics networks would be too vulnerable to Council counterattacks. The most devastating human victory came when Morrison's virus corrupted the navigation systems of a Council fleet, jumping through hyperspace, causing 12 capital ships to emerge inside a star system's gravity well. The alien vessels were destroyed instantly, while human forces recorded the incident as proof that superior technology meant nothing without tactical competence. Council species that had been considered peaceful for centuries began experiencing raids and sabotage as Turner's infiltration teams demonstrated that no alien world was safe from human retaliation. The psychological impact of these attacks was enormous, since Council populations had believed their military superiority guaranteed complete security. Veltar and other Council leaders struggled to coordinate their response, while human cyber warfare disrupted their communication networks and supply systems. The aliens had not faced this kind of asymmetric conflict for so long that their commanders had no experience dealing with opponents who refused to fight according to established rules. Human casualties were severe, but not as catastrophic as Council projections had predicted, since the guerrilla tactics minimized exposure to alien firepower while maximizing damage to enemy infrastructure. Morrison's intelligence network provided early warning of Council movements, allowing human forces to avoid major engagements. While maintaining offensive pressure, the galactic community watched in amazement as the newest species not only survived Council retribution but inflicted significant damage on forces that had seemed invincible. Some subject species began questioning their own submission as they witnessed humanity's fierce resistance to alien domination. Clark's hidden shipyards continued producing replacement vessels using resources that had been stockpiled during the preparation phase, while Council forces struggled to locate and destroy the concealed manufacturing facilities. The mobile production capability gave humanity strategic flexibility that their enemies could not match. Turner's Special Operations expanded their activities to include recruitment of dissatisfied individuals from Council species who had grown tired of their subjected status. These alien allies provided intelligence and assistance that proved invaluable for operations behind enemy lines. The Council faced their first serious military challenge in centuries as human resistance demonstrated that their galactic dominance was not as secure as they had believed. Morrison continued broadcasting intelligence updates while coordinating with resistance cells throughout alien territory. Weber's technology teams developed new weapons and countermeasures based on captured alien equipment while adapting human systems to exploit weaknesses discovered during combat operations. The rapid innovation gave humanity tactical advantages that Council forces could not predict or counter effectively. Emma Morrison joined her father's crew as a communications specialist, bringing youthful determination and technical skills that helped coordinate the growing resistance movement. Her presence on the captured alien vessel symbolized humanity's commitment to fighting for their children's freedom, regardless of the personal cost to individual families. The first month of warfare proved that humanity could survive the initial Council assault and maintain effective resistance operations throughout alien territory. The question remained whether human forces could sustain their campaign long enough to achieve victory. or would eventually be ground down by a superior enemy. Numbers and resources in a prolonged conflict that tested both species' determination to achieve their objectives. 6 months into the conflict, the war had settled into a brutal stalemate where humanity controlled no major systems but had made Council space nearly uninhabitable through constant raids and sabotage that prevented normal civilian and military operations. The galaxy watched in fascination as the newest species continued to resist the overwhelming force that had crushed every previous rebellion. Dr. Amy Rodriguez made a breakthrough discovery and captured Council archives that changed everything humanity thought they knew about galactic history and the true nature of their enemies. The ruling species were not the original victors of ancient conquests, but survivors of a previous rebellion that had nearly succeeded in overthrowing the galactic order centuries before humanity entered space. The archives revealed that the 12 Council species had once been subjects themselves, under an even more oppressive regime that had controlled the galaxy for thousands of years. The previous overlords had been destroyed in a massive uprising led by species that were now extinct, but had left behind hidden caches of advanced weapons waiting for another civilization brave enough to challenge tyranny, Rodriguez transmitted her findings to Admiral Clark, who immediately began searching for the ancient progenitor vaults that supposedly contained technology beyond current understanding. The weapons had been hidden in the galactic core where few species ventured due to dangerous gravitational anomalies and radiation fields that made exploration extremely hazardous. Clark led a desperate mission to the galactic center using her most advanced stealth ships and best crews for what everyone understood might be a one-way journey into the most dangerous region of known space. The progenitor technology represented humanity's only hope of gaining advantages that could offset Council numerical superiority. The ancient vaults were discovered exactly where the archives indicated, hidden within massive space stations that had somehow survived for millennia in the hostile environment near the galactic core. The progenitor weapons responded to human determination and intent rather than technical knowledge, suggesting that the original builders had intended them for future rebels. Meanwhile, cracks began appearing in the Council alliance as member species witnessed humanity's fierce resistance and started questioning their own subjugation under alien rule. The Altarians, despite centuries of pacification, began conducting quiet acts of sabotage against Council installations while maintaining their appearance of peaceful compliance. The Centauri engineers, who were forced to maintain Council fleets, started introducing subtle flaws into critical systems that would compound during battle, causing catastrophic failures at crucial moments. These acts of rebellion were carefully disguised as accidents or equipment malfunctions to avoid immediate retaliation. Captain Morrison made contact with these potential allies while commanding his captured Council destroyer and discovered that many subject species retained memories of their former independence buried beneath generations of conditioning. Morrison's daughter, Emma, proved invaluable in these negotiations since her youth and idealism helped bridge cultural gaps between species. The discovery of progenitor weapons fundamentally changed the war's dynamic, but using them required enormous sacrifice since whoever activated the ancient systems would likely be consumed in the process. The weapons operated on principles that human science could not comprehend and demanded payment in life force from those who wielded them. Turner's Special Operations teams reported growing unrest throughout Council territory as subject populations began remembering what they had lost when they accepted alien protection. The psychological warfare campaign had succeeded beyond expectations as species that had forgotten how to fight started rediscovering their warrior traditions. Clark's forces began integrating progenitor technology into their ships and weapons, creating hybrid systems that combined human engineering with alien science beyond current understanding. The new capabilities allowed human fleets to engage Council forces more directly while maintaining their mobility advantage. The Council leadership struggled to maintain unity among their member species as the human rebellion inspired dissent throughout their territory. Veltar and other commanders faced growing resistance from their own populations, while trying to coordinate military operations against increasingly sophisticated human forces. Rodriguez continued studying progenitor archives and discovered that The ancient weapons could only be fully activated by species that truly understood the value of freedom and were willing to sacrifice everything to preserve it. The original builders had created safeguards that prevented the technology from being used by tyrants or conquerors. Morrison's intelligence network expanded to include contacts throughout Council space as more alien individuals decided to risk their lives helping the human resistance. These allies provided crucial information about Council troop movements and strategic planning. While secretly sabotaging military operations, Weber's teams worked to understand and improve the hybrid technology that combined human innovation with progenitor engineering, creating weapons and defensive systems that exceeded anything previously seen in galactic warfare. The rapid technological advancement gave humanity strategic capabilities that Council forces could not predict. Emma Morrison coordinated communications between human forces and alien resistance groups while developing translation protocols that allowed effective cooperation between species that had been isolated from each other for centuries. Her work proved essential for building the coalition that would be needed for final victory. The war entered a new phase as humanity gained access to weapons that could challenge Council technological superiority, while inspiring other species to join the fight for galactic freedom. The question remained whether the growing alliance could coordinate effectively enough to defeat an enemy that still controlled most of the galaxy's resources. Turner's infiltration teams began training alien volunteers in guerrilla warfare techniques, while establishing hidden bases throughout Council territory where resistance fighters could coordinate operations against their former masters. The rebellion spread faster than Council forces could contain, as centuries of suppressed anger finally found expression. Clark prepared for the final campaign knowing that humanity had gained the tools necessary for victory but would need to coordinate a galaxy-wide uprising to achieve their objectives. The progenitor weapons offered hope, but their use would require sacrifices that would test everyone's commitment to freedom. Rodriguez made final preparations to unlock the most powerful progenitor systems while knowing that activating them would likely cost her life and the lives of everyone involved in the process. The ancient builders had designed their ultimate weapons to ensure that victory would be purchased with the blood of those brave enough to wield them against tyranny. The final battle began when Admiral Clark's combined fleet arrived at the Council's capital system, where their primary forces guarded the homeworlds of the ruling species in what everyone understood would be the decisive engagement of the war. Humanity brought their hidden vessels now equipped with progenitor weapons alongside a growing coalition of rebel species, who had rediscovered their courage and determination to fight. The approaching armada included Altarian fighters piloted by warriors who had forgotten their heritage for centuries but now flew with desperate skill that amazed even their human allies. Centauri engineering marvels deployed throughout the fleet turned captured Council ships against their own forces using override codes that had been secretly programmed during routine maintenance operations. Council forces were vast but predictable, as they formed traditional defensive formations that had served them well against conventional opponents throughout galactic history. The alien commanders could not adapt quickly enough to face coordinated strikes from multiple species using tactics they had abandoned so long ago that current military doctrine contained no counters. Captain Morrison led the assault on the Council's central command station where the ruling species made their final stand in a massive facility that controlled the galactic communication network and military coordination systems. Morrison's team fought through automated defenses and alien security forces while Emma coordinated the attack from their captured destroyer. The space battle raged around the command station as human vessels equipped with progenitor technology engaged Council capital ships in direct combat for the first time in the war. The ancient weapons proved devastating against alien defenses that had been designed to counter conventional energy and projectile systems. Turner's special operations teams struck simultaneously across 12 worlds, targeting the infrastructure that maintained Council control over their subject populations. The coordinated assault severed communication links and destroyed administrative centers, while local resistance groups emerged from hiding to join the attacks. Inside the command station, Morrison discovered the central AI that had coordinated Council operations for centuries and realized it was actually a progenitor construct that had been reprogrammed by the current rulers. The ancient machine offered humanity the ultimate prize by suggesting they could become the new galactic overlords with technology that would make resistance impossible. Morrison faced the same choice that had confronted every species that challenged the existing order throughout galactic history. He could claim dominion over the galaxy and rule through superior force, or reject power and accept the chaos that would follow the Council's destruction. The captain's decision defined humanity's future and their relationship with every other species in the galaxy. Instead of accepting the AIS offer, Morrison activated the station's self-destruct sequence while broadcasting a message that reached every world, simultaneously explaining that humanity had not fought for conquest but for freedom. The station's destruction sent cascading failures through the Council's control network, freeing suppressed populations across hundreds of worlds as the technological shackles that had maintained order for centuries suddenly failed. Without their communications and coordination, Systems Council forces could not maintain unity or respond effectively to the spreading rebellion. Admiral Clark coordinated the establishment of a new galactic confederation based on voluntary cooperation, rather than forced submission, while understanding that the transition would be chaotic and sometimes violent as species rediscovered their identities. The process required patience and wisdom as ancient grievances surfaced between former enemies. President Carter, now elderly and worn by years of war, addressed the first assembly of the new confederation, acknowledging the enormous cost in human lives and destroyed worlds that victory had required. Carter stood by the decision to fight rather than accept peaceful subjugation, while recognizing that millions had died to earn the freedom that others would now enjoy. The president's speech emphasized that humanity had chosen war to earn true peace, rather than accept the false security that Council protection had offered. The distinction between genuine peace and mere absence of conflict became the foundation principle for the new galactic government that emerged from the ashes of the old order. Morrison retired to a quiet colony world with his wife Helen watching their daughter Emma rise through the ranks of the new Confederation defense force that would protect the freedom they had fought to establish. Emma represented humanity's future as warriors, when necessary, but diplomats by choice who would guard liberty for all species. Dr. Rodriguez survived the final battle despite everyone's expectations and continued her research into progenitor technology, while helping establish the historical archives that would preserve the true story of galactic liberation. Her work ensured that future generations would understand the price of freedom and the dangers of accepting tyranny. The story reached its conclusion when a new species made contact with the Confederation, displaying the same aggressive tendencies that had characterized early human expansion into space. The young aliens reminded everyone of humanity's own journey from primitive warriors to galactic guardians of freedom. The question arose whether the newcomers would choose peaceful cooperation with the established Confederation or repeat humanity's path by learning through conflict that some wars must be fought to preserve peace. Emma Morrison smiled as she prepared to greet the new species, knowing that the choice belonged to them. Rodriguez prepared for first contact discussions, understanding that humanity had learned the most important lesson about galactic politics. Peace was not the absence of conflict, but the presence of choice and the strength to defend that choice against anyone who would take it away through force or deception. The final message echoed President Carter's famous declaration that had launched the war and defined its purpose. They had wanted peace, but humanity prepared for war so that every species in the galaxy could choose its own destiny, without fear of those who would impose their will through superior technology or overwhelming force. The Confederation stood ready to welcome new members who chose cooperation while remaining prepared to defend against those who preferred conquest. Humanity had become the guardians of galactic freedom, with the strength to protect what they had won and the wisdom to use that strength only when necessary to preserve the peace they had earned through sacrifice and determination.